100% right, every time. The McClaskey Excellence Institute brings you The Operations Experts, a podcast with hosts David McClaskey and Billy Schaefer. Delight your customers, reduce errors, and increase repeat business. Take your operations from ordinary to extraordinary. Well, welcome to the Operations Expert Podcast, where we talk about operations excellence and leaders who make it happen. And today we're going to be joined David McClaskey. I'll be one of your hosts, president of McClaskey Excellence Institute, and Billy Schaefer, the vice president of McClaskey Excellence Institute. Billy?
Well, thank you, David. Well, now, I would say it's a little bit different today. Is a lot of times we have people coming in and people in the operational world that we want to showcase. Well, today we're going to look at it from a little bit different angle. We want to talk about strategic planning. And we just happen to have somebody who has worked with an incredible number of groups. So actually, we have the expert in the room today that we're going to talk about. And that expert is going to be our very own president, David McClaskey. Been doing this for 50 years, working with all sorts of groups. So, David, I feel like I'm going to interview you today. And so I want to know, how did you get interested in this? It's such a weird thing to get interested in, but it seems like you've fallen into it and found a great love for it. So how did you get into this?
Well, if you think about operations excellence, and you can do so much with what you have, but it's even better if you can say, how can I systematically design it? So a year from now, I'm in a whole lot better shape. I can do a whole lot more than I could do if I started where I was a year ago. So it's a natural extension of excellence. So you say, I always have to start from where I am. But if I say one of the things I'm going to do in the next year is to actually be much better at both deciding on what initiatives I should have and implementing them and making them effective and maintaining them, that's what strategic planning is all about. So it's a natural starting point. And as we talk about in our Achieving World-Class Results class, everything focused on the purpose, the mission, the key customer requirements. And it's hard to do that when you have initiatives that are focused in a half a dozen different directions. So strategic planning gets everything focused on the very best way to accomplish your mission and your key customer requirements.
So it is just a natural extension of every single thing else that we work with people on. That's incredible. Now, who can take advantage of this? What kind of companies can actually use strategic planning?
In fact, just about every company, including consulting companies that are companies of one. So every size company can do it, and I've done it with just about every size company. And it's particularly companies that have multiple units, even if it's just 3 or more units. They get a lot of benefit out of it. But even if it's just a single unit or a single person, even they can get great benefit out of it. So it really is almost any organization. What we find is that service industries have an extra special kick from strategic planning. Because manufacturing, it's like we're making this product with this equipment, much harder to change. Service can actually change almost everything about them within a year, if they should choose to do that, which is usually not the right answer. But they have a lot more options, but you have to decide which option's right for you. And that's the place we start with strategic planning.
I really love the fact where you said, this works even with a company of one. I often hear that I'm the CEO of Billy Schaefer Inc. Mm-hmm. Maybe I need to set up and have some strategic planning for my life for the next year and see how that might help me out.
There you go. And if you want to even get further than that, you can do this for any entity. Whether we're mostly working with work entities, mm-hmm. but you could have any nonprofit, anything that I'm just a member of this nonprofit. But you can tell they're not organized. They need strategic planning. I do it with a lot of nonprofits for that reason. And a lot of times it's a member that said, we could be so much more effective at accomplishing our mission if we had our act together, mm-hmm. and strategic planning can help do it. And here's another one. This one is so profound that most people, even though I mention it, they'll go, oh, don't say that. A family is an organizational unit. But there's almost no family that can answer the question, what's the purpose of the family? And have every member of the family actually respond the same answer. So one of the reasons that families aren't as effective as they could be, because the family has never agreed to why the family exists. Wow, and so strategic planning can actually do that.
Takes us all the way back to the family crest and the family motto. And, well, we're getting a little historical today.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, now I know you said something like it helps organization. And now, David, I've worked with you long enough that I know you break down everything. And it seems to be the typical standard that there's 4 parts to everything in the world. So I'm guessing, is there 4 parts to strategic planning?
Your intuition is exactly right, because there's four main. Yeah, look at that. You just absolutely nailed it, didn't you? And I'm glad you said that I break things down, not break things up. So that's good. Breaking things down is good. Breaking things up isn't. So 4 parts of strategic planning. Each of them has their own sort of science behind it. They all come together. The first one is developing the strategy itself. Here is the strategy. For example, if we go to just some really basic ones that have made huge impact, you go to Sam Walton's strategy. His strategy was discounting. So he had a strategy of saying, I'm going to sell things as cheap as I can, as long as I make a little bit of profit on every item. In a world that almost every one of his other competitors was, I want to make the most profit I can make off every item I can sell. So what he did was have a low price and sold more of them. And he said, look, here's the deal. If I sell 1,000 units and make 10 cents each, I'm making more money than somebody that sold 10 units and made $1 per unit. And the reason I can sell 1,000 and they're only selling 10 is because mine's like 1/3 less price, because I'm going for the minimum discount. And he built the biggest, and still has the biggest, consumer products company in the world. Strategy is what did it. And then the execution came from the strategy. And in fact, it used to be what Sam Walton would do. What did Sam Walton do when he was a CEO? One of the things he would do is he would go to his Walmart stores and they would do competitive shopping. They would buy stuff at Walmart, and then they would take, Kmart was their biggest big competitor for a while, until they wiped Kmart out, in essence. And then they would go to the same Kmart store and buy the same stuff. And if the Walmart prices weren't cheaper than the Kmart prices, because they were both theoretically in the discounting business, but he said, the only way I'm going to win against Kmart, much bigger Kresge company, much bigger than I was at that time, is I have to be better at discounting than he is. That was their strategy. And they enforced it and never changed their strategy, still haven't changed their strategy in that regard. And it was the strategy that led to Walmart winning over all of their competitors. And the fact that, so the first, they had a strategy, and that's step number one. But what the data shows is that 60 to 80% of the strategies never get implemented. So they're just a sheet of paper that somebody put down. Could be good ideas, could be bad ideas, but who knows, because nobody ever used the ideas. So the second part is deployment. You've got to say, okay, here's these things, who's going to do it? And we think of the next part as implementation, but that really doesn't work well. Deployment is who's going to implement it and what resources do they need and what kind of project plan do they need to have. So we set up who's responsible and who's the resources and what time are they actually going to get in to do this. And that's strategy deployment. And I can tell you, I learned from the Japanese counselors when I was at Florida Power and Light, the first company that won the Deming Prize. They asked me to come, and just 2 outside people they asked to come in. And I got to work beside these Japanese counselors as they gave the best policy deployment. They called their strategies policy deployment process in the world. And so I got to learn from the leaders, the best strategic planning deployment process, and it's just fantastic to see it. So you deploy it. So now we have the plan and who's accountable, and they have resources. Then there's the third step is implementation. Now people have to carry out the plan. If you were supposed to do this project with these resources and get this results, we want to know how you're doing every week or every other week. We're gonna manage this with project management. And then the last one is, this is an annual cycle. It doesn't happen just once. So the last year you evaluate, how well did we accomplish our strategies? How well would you deploy our strategies? Did we pick the right strategies? And then you use that information to improve your strategic planning process, and then you use that again. So you're always getting better and better at strategic planning. And can I share a story of how well this works?
Please.
Florida Power and Light. So they're an electric utility in South Florida, East Florida, really. So big electric utility. They were the first company to win the Deming Prize, which is the foremost prize for excellence in Japan, outside of Japan. So they were the first ones to win it. And that's why Japan was getting such an edge in the 60s and 70s, is because they had the Deming Prize, which we now have the Baldrige Award that does it for the United States. And they were a okay performing electric utility. I mean, they weren't bad. They were reasonable, among others. But their strategic plans, you'd get some, you wouldn't get some, you would do some. Pretty typical performance. After working with the Japanese for just a couple of years, they were so sure that their strategies would not only be accomplished, but would achieve the desired results, that they would start doing strategic planning as if they were 1 year later and that these results were in place. And 95% of the time they were correct.
Wow.
So they would actually bet that and these weren't easy strategic plans. These are pretty elaborate and pretty, they weren't just like, oh, they just made them easy. No, these were pretty stretch plans in some respects. They could absolutely count on them because the process was that assured. And when you have leadership, they can say, okay, this plan will be a reality in 365 days. My job as the top leader of the company is to start figuring out what the right objectives are 1 year from now when these results are in place. So when they came up with strategies, they'd been thinking about it for a whole year. So they really had a great thing. So it was fabulous to say, you want to know what the future is going to be? Just let's see what their strategic plan is. It's so good. This will be a reality and you can bet on it.
Well, that's incredible. You said two things that I really want to go back to is, hey, it's strange to hear anybody talk about Walmart as the smaller of the two companies.
Oh, yeah.
But you got to see their growth and you see it. I mean, the results there, they went from not near as big as Kmart to now they are the behemoth of everything. But the one thing I would love to hear a little bit more about is, I don't know if everybody knows about the Deming Prize. I take it it's not easy to win. I take it this is something that takes a little bit of time and effort. Is that
Yeah.
is that true?
It is it is unbelievably thorough. And the car, if you think about Nissan or Toyota or any of those, they started out way behind the U.S. automotive. I mean, they couldn't even hardly produce cars that would work. And using the implementation that would go with the Deming Prize and using great strategic planning was the basic strategic plan was sell cars outside Japan, mostly to the United States. And you couldn't sell cars in the United States unless you could make cars that were equal to or better quality and better value than the three top American manufacturers. And they were miles ahead of the Japanese. So within about 6-7 years, they caught up. And with another 6-7 years, they were like in number 4 place, number 3 place. At one point, we're the biggest provider of cars to the United States. Now, it kind of wrestles around a bit, but that's what the Deming Prize was able to do because it basically talks about all aspects of management and what we do in essence and then the Baldrige Award was the U.S. version of that. And because they said, look, this is so successful, we're not going to just invent it ourselves. We're going to build off it and build one that works for our culture. And our Achieving World-Class Results class was based on the Deming Prize, the Baldrige Award. But now let's make it simple enough that companies that even have 1 unit can use it. Or if they have 50 units, they can use it. Because these processes require, if you go to the Deming Prize, the Baldrige Award itself, there's a lot of complexity in understanding the criteria. That's why when I'm a Baldrige consultant, I help them understand the criteria. But what we said is, how about we make a criteria like in our Achieving World-Class Results class that doesn't require the explanation. When you hear it, you say, okay, I get it. And that's why the Deming Prize is terribly powerful. So is the Baldrige Award. And our Achieving World-Class Results class is the way to actually get the power of those things into individual companies.
That is incredible. So to everybody listening, if you truly love what you're hearing right now, and I do, we have to think, can you use those same principles that Sam Walton used to go from the smaller of the two to this behemoth, or that Nissan and Toyota, or all these great companies that have used strategic planning? Well, if you want to go to the mountaintop, or if you want to go to Everest, you need a guide, you need a Sherpa. That's what we are here for. David and I can help guide you through strategic planning to make it simple and easy to follow so that you can now not only take 50% of your goals from last year and accelerate that to 100% of your goals, not only written down, but achieved through strategic planning. This strategic planning becomes simple when you have a guide, and McClaskey Excellence Institute is the ones that can help guide you through this. And when you see the results, 20%, 50% more in revenue, just because you are now taking where you started last year and standing on the shoulders and seeing further instead of starting over again. Contact us at info@McClaskeyExcellence.com if you're interested in us guiding you through strategic planning. Well, David, I appreciate that everything you're saying here. It's absolutely incredible in the history and the Deming, but that's the who, the what, the why, and the where. But When do we do this? When is it important to actually strategic plan?
And that's a good point. Most companies do it near the end of the fourth quarter or the very beginning of the first quarter. So the planning period is sort of between October and the end of February. A lot of people would like to get it done for the end of the year. This is good timing. If you started now, you'd have it all set by the end of February, which works out really well because you have most of the year to work. So this is the ideal time to work on it, and we are consulting with companies who are doing strategic planning right now, and it is a pleasure to see the plan and the unity it causes. But more so, ones that because we work with the same companies over and over again, that you see the success from previous years, and you see that they've advanced their company, and it not only makes us feel good, but it makes the leadership feel good because they go, look, we caused this to happen because we ran this, we, the company leaders, ran the strategic planning process. We used the process that we suggested and facilitated, but it's done by the company leadership, not by outsiders. And then they see it work. They see their plan. They say, look, we could take all these resources and get them focused in the same direction and look at the results we got. And we're going to learn from that and even do better next year. So it's great to see the pride and the results.
I love that. And David, we've been talking a lot about what happens when you do it. Well, what happens when you don't?
That's a good point because most people don't see the path not taken. They only see the path taken. And one of the ways you can see it is working with companies who didn't do strategic planning, or they wrote a plan but never implemented them because I don't know how to get it implemented, or we tried things, but after a month, everybody was back to whatever they were working on, but without the plan. And then you see them using it and you see the results. And we've seen things like, okay, there's possibly level or just slightly increases in revenue, go from slight increases to 10 to 20% increases because they actually got the right strategic plan and implemented it. And it was right and it paid off, and you see it in the results, the main results the company gets.
Amazing. And I love the fact that, too often we look at, like you said, the path of the good, but sometimes we got to look at the other way to know what are we trying to avoid by actually doing this. And that pitfalls that we're going to avoid are just incredible that you're telling. Well, who's the last one you did this with? Can you tell me about how it went the last time you did this with a company and how it felt?
Oh, yeah. It was fabulous because working with a company absolutely dedicated to excellence, but they needed to tune up their strategic planning process. And the previous year they had a really good plan, but it didn't get executed very well. It got after 2 months, the execution went to zero. And so tuned up remember the part of development, deployment, and implementation was the issue. So we really reinforced the review process because we set up not only the plan, but how do you manage to the plan? Because that's the hard part, to get the resources to stay on track. And because if you think about Coving's 4 quadrants, the one that's important but not urgent, that's strategic planning. And so how do you keep people focused on the important but not urgent, as opposed to the urgent taking over everything? And strategic planning reviews help to do that. So we worked together and they set up a wonderful review process, and the leader ran that review process beautifully. And they got all of their major objectives accomplished. And a year later, what they had set out to be accomplished was accomplished. And now they're doing it again. So now we've done strategic planning and they're at it again. So it's such a pleasure to see, wow, we just look at whatever part's not working and get it working. And then you see it has great results.
I'd love to hear that because, I've always said that the worst place to be is where you were last year. So it's good that it's cool to see that they're moving forward, and that's pretty awesome. Well, David, I've asked you a lot of questions. Is there any questions you have for me that I'm able to?
Oh yeah, I've got. So Billy, you've been director of operations. You've had to actually be that leader who's helped to get the strategic plan implemented. Can you talk about, here's some of the problems, and then how did you overcome those problems to actually get people to focus on the strategy and not get diverted by the urgent?
It all comes down to, once you set that ritual of the follow-up, that it doesn't matter what else is happening, you are going to sit down for that follow-up. Because I can tell you that what happens, and I think you mentioned it in the company before, was the plan is in place. It's a wonderful plan. Then 2 months later, the plan has become wallpaper at best. It's a very expensive wallpaper, but it's wallpaper. And what happens is they don't sit down to talk about where they're at and how the progress is going and how they're moving forward and what got accomplished and all these
Hmm.
things that need to happen in order to make it moving forward. And where I've found that it always happens is one person goes on vacation, let's scrap the meeting. Well, why not? If you have the meeting in place, if you have that ritual set at Wednesday at 9:30 a.m., we're going to
Yeah.
sit down and we're going to get updates on the strategic plan. It doesn't matter if you're by yourself. You sit down and you go over the strategic plan at 9:30 on Wednesday morning. And that is the first pitfall is as soon as those meetings
Hmm.
become not important or, well,
Right.
somebody's missing it or they're on vacation or,
Hmm.
well, it's Thanksgiving week or, well, my dog
Yeah.
had its birthday, so I just can't be there.
Hmm.
Then it goes away. And if you miss one meeting, I always say that that strategic plan is as good as dead. So if the meeting itself to go over it has to be there because without that accountability cycle, it's just going to go away. And that's really a true thing. Now, the second part that I always talk about is how much are you going to talk about it outside of that meeting? Because if, hey, this is what's
Hmm.
important, this is the projects we're working on, how often are you following up with people on these projects? Because if you, well, what was my favorite thing and statement that I've always loved, and I took it the other way when I was told is, hey, if you want something to be a big deal, make it a big deal. And that statement was always
Okay.
said in the fact of don't make things a big deal. But I took it the other way. I was like, well, if I want this strategic plan to be a big deal, then I'm going to make it a big deal. I'm
Hmm.
going to talk about it all the time. Where are you at on this project? Where are you on that project? Where are we at? What can I do to, am I a part of a
Hmm.
collaboration? Am I the main person? It's just talking about it nonstop. And that's really how you move projects forward. If you're not talking about them, they're not happening. And that's been one of the ways that I've really helped move these forward as far as strategic planning.
Well, that's great. It shows some great insight of a seasoned leader and like yourself. So let me here's the excuses I hear all the time. We're short staffed. We're having a little trouble hiring. We lost a couple of our managers, or
Mm-hmm.
we've lost a couple of assistant managers, or a new competitor opened up. How do you? I'm sure your companies have had some of those same issues. How do you handle when those are the issues they're telling you why they're not working on the plan?
Well, I'll tell you what, what I learned is early on in the restaurant industry, we had a midday checklist, and this is what taught me how to make things
Yeah,
important no matter what was happening. And
yeah.
I remember this day and the leader that was in the building, and it was a torrential downpour. I mean, this was Forrest Gump, raining sideways kind of rain. Nobody was coming in the restaurant. It was done. I was standing there, and the leader came up and was like, Billy, why aren't you doing the 2 p.m.
Mhm,
checklist? It's 2 o'clock. And I just remember looking at him like, it's a tornado outside. What do you mean? And I remember him looking at me and saying, it doesn't matter if an earthquake happens. 2 p.m. is when we do the checklist because if one person dares to get out in here and come in and they don't have a good experience, then we didn't do our job. And that stuck with me that said, you know what? This is what we're doing. This is our plan. And when we don't execute the
mhm,
plan, it doesn't matter. So it doesn't matter if
mhm,
you're short staffed. It doesn't matter if a manager quits. It doesn't matter if a volcano erupts outside. You still
mhm,
are on the path to get the strategic plan done.
mhm,
All of those things are just excuses. That's 100% it. And if you want to not be excellent and live in that land of
mhm.
operational excellence, then let the excuses flow. They'll fill up your time more than the strategic plan will.
Yeah. Oh, that's great advice. And I can tell you one thing that we do structurally as we do the strategic planning workshops, which only takes a day or two, so it's
Mhm.
fairly quick and everything. Is that usually the head person or the head operations person will be the person who does the strategic plan reviews. But here was the trick: if you just have that and that person's busy, takes vacation, can't make it because there's a crisis in a restaurant, then the review doesn't happen. So we found one of our tricks is if you can't make it, who is the person that's going to lead the meeting when you can't?
Yeah.
So we make a designated automatic at any time. This person can't lead the meeting, you lead the meeting. And that tends to get 100% of them implemented because if you're relying on one person for a whole year, weekly or bi-weekly review meeting, something's going to happen where the person can't make it. Hopefully it's something like vacation as opposed to a crisis in the store. But
Mhm.
unfortunately, crises in the stores tend to be more predominant. But then, okay, we've got another. And what people understand is this meeting's going to happen, just like you said, because there's going to be someone to lead it under any and all circumstances.
That's 100% right. And if you all struggle to find that person to help lead that meeting, well, that's when you can reach out to David and I, and we can help you with your strategic plan. And if we have to step in and lead that meeting to make sure it doesn't miss, why don't you just reach out to us at info@McClaskeyExcellence.com, and we can definitely help you with your strategic plan. Well, thank you all for joining us today. We are the operations experts, and we're going to make sure we drop new episodes on the first Monday and the third Monday of every month. And we look forward to everybody listening, and we will see you soon.
Hey, take care.
Operations Experts was created by McClaskey Excellence Institute. Hosts were David McClaskey, president of McClaskey Excellence Institute, and Billy Schaefer, vice president of McClaskey Excellence Institute. The podcast was produced and edited by Kate Craig of Kate Craig Consulting. New episodes drop the first and third Monday of every month on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, Amazon Music. Find us online at McClaskeyExcellence.com and register for our Achieving World-Class Results course to enable your organization to deliver exactly what you promised every time using extraordinary operations.